What if everything you've been chasing isn't even what you truly want? What if the dreams you call yours were handed to you by someone else, society, parents, friends, or the endless scrolling of other people's lives? You've been running so fast, grinding so hard, climbing ladder after ladder, only to realize the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall. That thought shakes something deep inside, not because you're failing, but because you might be succeeding at the wrong thing. Imagine that. Winning a game that doesn't even matter to your soul. Asterisk, what if you're succeeding at something that doesn't even matter to your soul? That one question can shift the entire direction of your life. You wake up every day, hit your goals, get the praise, maybe even stack the money and the status, but deep inside, there's a strange emptiness you can't explain. It's like eating food that looks perfect on the plate, but leaves you hungry moments after. You're checking off every box on the list you were handed, but the satisfaction doesn't stay. You tell yourself to keep going, to be grateful, to push harder, but a quiet voice keeps asking, what's the point if your soul isn't in its success? Isn't always a sign you're on the right path. Sometimes it's just proof that you're good at following a system that doesn't belong to you. You learn how to play the game, say the right things, dress the part, smile on cue, and keep moving forward even when your heart is screaming for something else. You become a master of adaptation, but a stranger to yourself. You might be winning, but what are you really winning? More pressure, more comparison, more roles to play, and less of you. So many people are trapped in lives they built out of fear, not love. Fear of judgment, fear of being seen as a failure, fear of starting over, fear of disappointing others. They commit decades to careers they don't love, relationships that don't grow them, and dreams that were never their own to begin with. They spend so much energy fitting in that they forget what it feels like to stand up for their truth. And the irony is, they look successful to everyone else, but inside, they feel like something's missing. And that missing piece is often themselves. There comes a point when external achievements can't fill internal voids. You can have the house, the title, the followers, the admiration, but if you don't feel alive, what does it really mean? We've been conditioned to chase metrics and milestones instead of meaning. We're told to measure our worth by how much we produce, how fast we climb, how visible we are. But all of that collapses when you wake up one day and realize you've climbed the wrong mountain. That realization is terrifying, but it's also a blessing, because it gives you a chance to choose different. The real question isn't whether you're capable, it's whether you're aligned. Alignment means doing what sets your soul on fire, not just what pays the bills or earns the applause. It means listening to that quiet knowing inside you, the one you keep pushing down, because it sounds risky or unrealistic or inconvenient. But ignoring that voice doesn't make it disappear. It just creates a tension you carry in your chest every day, a weight you can't name but always feel symptoms. Success is just survival in disguise. You show up, perform, deliver, but you're not truly alive. You smile, but it doesn't reach your eyes. You achieve, but it doesn't fulfill you. You've learned to wear the mask so well that even you start to forget it's there. But your soul remembers. It remembers the dreams you buried, the creativity you shut down, the joy you postponed, the truth you were too afraid to speak. And it keeps calling you back. Wrong game makes you feel like you're always behind. Even when you're ahead, it fuels anxiety, not peace. It demands more and more, while giving you less and less. You spend your life trying to win a race that never ends. And when you finally reach the place you thought would bring you happiness, you find it's just another checkpoint, another goalpost moved, another empty victory. You were not made for constant striving. You were made to live deeply, to create from the heart, to connect with purpose. But none of that is possible if you keep climbing ladders that don't lead to meaning. At some point, you have to stop and ask whose game you're playing. Who told you this was the way? Who benefits from you staying silent, small, or stuck? And more importantly, who would you become if you let all of that go? It takes courage to step away from something that looks like success, to say no to what the world says you should want, to choose stillness over speed, to walk a path with no map. But that's where real freedom lives, in the unknown, in the honest, in the space between what you've been and what you're meant to be. You don't have to throw your life away. You just have to start telling the truth inside it. Start small, Ask yourself what you actually enjoy. Notice what drains you and what energizes you. Pay attention to what makes you lose track of time. What you do even if no one ever saw it. What feels like love, not just labor. These clues are everywhere, but you can't find them if you are too busy performing symptoms. The shift isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's a slow unfolding, a gentle course correction, a quiet decision to live more honestly, to show up with your whole heart, to stop chasing and start choosing, to stop pretending and start feeling, to stop succeeding at things that don't matter, and start building a life that does. You are not here to be impressive. You're here to be real. The version of you that's been hiding beneath layers of expectation and pressure. That's the version that holds your power. Not the one with the perfect resume, the one with the raw truth, the one who remembers who they were before the world told them who to be. That version doesn't care about playing the game. That version came here to change it. So what if you're succeeding at something that doesn't even matter to your soul? It means you're awake enough to see it. And now that you see it, you don't have to keep going. You don't have to keep pretending. You're allowed to pause, to question, to walk away, to rewrite. Because success isn't about how things look on the outside. It's about how it feels on the inside. And nothing feels better than coming home to yourself. True burnout isn't from doing too much, it's from doing what doesn't align with who you are. This is the part no one tells you. They say you're overwhelmed because you're too busy or because you need more sleep or better time management. But none of those things matter if what you're doing every day drains your spirit. You can manage your time perfectly and still feel exhausted if your time is being spent in the wrong direction. You can sleep 8 hours a night and still wake up tired if the life you're waking up to doesn't reflect who you really are. Burnout doesn't come from activity alone. It comes from disconnection, from the slow, quiet ache of living a life that's not yours. It's easy to blame fatigue on workload. But what if it's deeper than that? What if you're tired because you're forcing yourself to care about things that don't matter to you? What if you're constantly trying to keep up with a pace that was never designed for your soul? What if you're playing a role so perfectly that you forgot how to be yourself? It's not the work that's breaking you down, it's the misalignment. You're showing up every day in a life that doesn't honor your truth, and that dissonance wears you out from the inside. When your values and your actions are in conflict, your body feels it. When your heart wants something different than your schedule allows, your mind gets noisy. When your spirit longs for space and meaning, but your reality offers pressure and performance, exhaustion becomes your baseline. You don't need more motivation. You need more alignment. You don't need to be more productive. You need to be more honest about what you're producing and why. The wrong game asks for your energy, but never gives you peace in return. You can work long hours on something you love and feel energized at the end of the day. You can spend hours in flow and feel more alive, not less. The difference isn't the amount of effort, it's the presence of purpose. When you're doing what aligns with your core, your effort feeds you instead of draining you. But when you're grinding for validation or status or survival, your energy gets used up faster than you can refill it. You become a machine, and machines break down when they're overused and undervalued. Some of the most exhausted people in the world aren't working 3 jobs. They're working one job that makes them feel invisible. They're giving their hours and hearts to something that doesn't reflect their deepest values. They're trying to be everything to everyone while slowly becoming no one to themselves. They're not broken, they're misaligned. And the cure for misalignment isn't hustle, it's truth. You can't meditate or journal or drink enough coffee to fix a life that's built on the wrong foundation. The modern world rewards performance over presence and productivity over purpose. We are praised for how much we do, not how deeply we feel. We're taught to celebrate burnout as a badge of honor, as proof of our commitment. But what kind of life is that? A life where being exhausted means you're successful, where ignoring your needs is considered noble, where your worth is tied to how much you can endure. That's not living, that's surviving. And surviving is not the same as thriving. Ask yourself what parts of your life feel heavy and why. Ask what parts you keep doing out of obligation rather than joy. Ask where you've silenced your truth to fit in or to be accepted. These are the areas where burnout is born, not from effort, but from the emotional cost of pretending. Pretending you're okay, pretending you're interested, pretending this is what you want. The truth is heavy, but the lies we carry are heavier. You don't need to burn your life down to change it, but you do need to get real about what you want, about what's not working, about where your energy goes and what you get back in return. Because the longer you stay in the wrong game, the more distant your real self becomes. And the more distant you are from yourself, the more tired you'll feel even when nothing looks wrong from the outside. Burnout isn't a scheduling issue. It's a soul issue. It's what happens when your life no longer reflects your inner truth. Most people don't even realize they're burnt out until they stop, until the noise fades, and they finally hear how tired they really are, until they step away from the performance and feel the emptiness that applause can't fix, until they spend one moment in something honest and remember what peace feels like. That's when it hits them. The exhaustion wasn't from too much work. It was from not enough meaning, not enough self, not enough truth. You are allowed to stop doing what drains you. You are allowed to pivot. You are allowed to admit that something that once worked no longer does. You are allowed to choose rest without guilt and purpose without explanation. You are allowed to leave a path that others praise if your soul no longer feels at home there. Burnout is not a failure, it's a signal, a message from your inner self saying this isn't working anymore. Listen to that message before it becomes a crisis. Your life should reflect your essence, not just your effort. It should be a reflection of what you love, what you value, what makes you feel alive. Anything less will always cost more energy than it gives, and you don't have to wait for a breakdown to make a change. You can choose alignment now. You can begin the quiet return to yourself. Because once you remember what truth feels like, you won't trade it for performance again. You'll know that real peace doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing what matters most to you. The wrong game rewards performance, not authenticity. It teaches you how to act, not how to feel. It shapes your image but starves your soul. From a young age, you're taught to polish the outside to be impressive, presentable, admired. You learn the script, the timing, the rhythm of success. You memorize what to say and when to say it. You master the ability to smile when you're broken, to nod when you disagree, to perform emotions you don't feel. And the better you get at the performance, the more the world claps. But inside, a quiet ache grows louder because the applause isn't for you, it's for the role you're playing. In the wrong game. Being real is a risk. Vulnerability is seen as weakness. Honesty is filtered, edited, and scripted. You're rewarded for fitting in, not for standing out with your truth. So you trade your uniqueness for belonging. You shape your personality to match what's expected. You become what others need you to be, just to feel accepted. You shrink your edges, mute your opinions, smile past your truth, and slowly start forgetting who you actually are. You lose yourself in a version of life that was never designed with your soul in mind. There comes a point when the weight of pretending becomes unbearable. You start feeling tired even when you've done nothing. You feel unseen even when you're constantly in the spotlight. You feel surrounded yet disconnected. That's the cost of playing the wrong game. You become a stranger to your own life. You're praised for your strength, but no one sees your struggle. You're known for your work ethic, but not for your heart. People admire what you do but overlook who you are. And the more you perform, the more invisible you become. Authenticity requires courage. It means showing up without the mask, speaking without the script, and allowing yourself to be fully seen even when it's uncomfortable. But in a world that rewards perfection, authenticity feels dangerous. You risk rejection. You risk being misunderstood. You risk losing the approval you worked so hard to earn. So most people stay silent. They stick to the routine. They do what works, even if it doesn't work for their soul. And in doing so, they slowly bury the most beautiful parts of themselves beneath layers of expectation. The wrong game doesn't care about your peace. It only cares about your productivity. It doesn't ask how you feel. It only asks what you can deliver. It doesn't nourish your heart. It only measures your output. You can give your best years to this system and still be left feeling empty. Because no amount of performance can satisfy a soul that longs for truth. And the more you ignore that longing, the more it begins to affect everything: your energy, your joy, your clarity, your relationships. You start wondering why nothing feels fulfilling, why every achievement feels shallow, why even when you win, it doesn't feel like victory. It's because the game is designed to keep you chasing. Just when you reach one milestone, another appears. Just when you think you're enough, something new tells you that you're still behind. It's a treadmill disguised as progress, and the speed only increases. But no matter how fast you run, you'll never feel whole if you're running in the wrong direction. Real freedom comes when you choose truth over approval. When you stop performing and start showing up as yourself. When you let go of the pressure to be perfect and allow yourself to be real. That's when peace returns. That's when your energy begins to flow again. That's when you remember what it feels like to be human, not just a brand, not just a worker, not just a name on a screen, but a living, breathing soul with depth and purpose. The right game doesn't ask you to shrink or change. It asks you to expand. It invites your truth, your honesty, your story. It welcomes your imperfections and honors your humanity. In the right game, you don't have to prove your worth. You just have to be present. Your value isn't measured by how much you do or how perfect you seem. It's felt in your presence, your energy, your alignment. You're not a machine. You're not here to impress. You're here to live deeply and authentically. You have to be willing to lose the wrong applause to find the right peace. You have to be willing to disappoint others in order to stay true to yourself. You have to choose honesty even when it's uncomfortable. That's what it means to play the right game. It's not about being loud or rebellious. It's about being honest. It's about listening to the part of you that knows when something isn't right, even if the world says it is. That quiet knowing inside you is not weakness, it's wisdom. And it's always pointing you back home. You were not born to play a role. You were born to live a story. One that is uniquely yours. One that doesn't fit into someone else's box. One that may not be easy or widely understood, but will feel like truth every step of the way. The wrong game will always reward what you do. The right path will honor who you are. And when who you are and what you do finally align, that's when the weight lifts. That's when life begins to feel like yours again. That's when the performance ends and the real you begins to rise. Success without peace is just a polished prison. It looks good from the outside. It sounds impressive when people talk about it. It earns you respect and admiration. But inside, it can feel cold, hollow, and suffocating. You check every box that the world celebrates. You've accomplished what others dream about. You've climbed high, achieved more, gained recognition. But somewhere along the way, you lost yourself. The shine of success fades when you realize you can't breathe freely inside the life you built. That's when it hits you. You might have won the game, but you're not free. You get to the top and expect to feel fulfillment. You expect joy. You expect peace. But instead, you find pressure. You find a new level of pretending. You find more eyes watching, more people expecting, and fewer moments where you can simply be. You start wondering if this is what success is supposed to feel like. Because if it is, why does it feel so heavy? Why does it feel like something is missing? Why does peace feel so far away? Why you see people clapping for you, but it doesn't feel real? You smile for the pictures, but behind the smile is a weight no one else sees. Because success, when it's not rooted in alignment, becomes a cage. You have the rewards, but not the rest. You have the image, but not the intimacy with yourself. You can't stop, can't slow down, can't say no, because everything is now built around maintaining this version of you that people celebrate. And the worst part is you start to feel guilty for feeling this way. You tell yourself to be grateful. You remind yourself of all the people who would trade places with you. But gratitude doesn't erase misalignment. It doesn't silence the soul when it's being ignored. Just because your life looks good doesn't mean it feels good. Just because others envy you doesn't mean you're fulfilled. You can be grateful and still be lost. You can be successful and still feel imprisoned. That pressure to keep winning keeps you trapped. You're not free to change direction. You're not free to rest. You're not free to admit you want something different. You fear that slowing down will make you lose momentum. You fear that shifting course will make people question your strength. So you keep going, even though you're exhausted. You keep smiling, even though your joy is fading. You keep producing, even though you're disconnected from your purpose. Success without peace demands more than it gives. It costs you your health, your time, your relationships, your presence. You give and give to maintain an image that no longer reflects who you are. You play a role that no longer fits, and every time you silence your truth to keep the show going, you tighten the chains around your spirit. It becomes harder to breathe, harder to feel, harder to remember who you were before. All the space isn't the absence of ambition. It's the presence of alignment. It's when what you're doing flows from who you really are. It's when your outer world reflects your inner truth, when your actions match your values, when your success includes rest, joy, depth, and freedom, when you can look around and know that you didn't just build something impressive, you built something honest, something that allows you to breathe with at peace. Success turns into survival. You're constantly managing stress, protecting your image, and trying not to collapse under the pressure. You become reactive instead of creative, defensive instead of open. You lose your ability to feel joy because you're always bracing for the next demand. And slowly, you begin to accept that this is just the way it is. But deep down, you know, it doesn't have to be. You can choose a different way, a slower way, a more intentional way, a way that honors your energy, your heart, your voice. You can define success in a way that includes your soul. You don't have to stay locked in a life that looks good but feels wrong. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to create space for peace without apology. Peace begins when you tell the truth, when you admit that the version of success you're chasing isn't bringing you home to yourself, when you allow yourself to feel again, to breathe again, to rest without guilt, to dream without limits. Peace begins when you stop performing and start living, when you stop proving and start listening, when you stop trying to be who they want and start becoming who you are. You weren't created to live in a polished prison. You weren't created to wear a perfect mask while your heart quietly breaks. You weren't created to survive your own success. You were created to thrive in your truth, to experience joy not just from outcomes, but from alignment, to build a life that doesn't just look beautiful in pictures, but feels beautiful in your soul. It takes courage to redefine success. It takes strength to walk away from what the world praises if it no longer feeds your spirit. But the moment you choose peace over performance, you start to feel alive again. You start to remember your own voice. You start to breathe without pressure. And that's when you realize freedom was never about what you accomplished. It was always about who you gave yourself permission to be. Success without peace is a trap. But success with peace is power. It's clarity. It's confidence. It's showing up with wholeness. Not just hustle. It's creating not just for approval, but from purpose. It's choosing presence over performance. And it's remembering that the most successful life is the one that gives you back to yourself fully, freely, and peacefully. Quitting the wrong path isn't failure, it's freedom. It's the moment you finally choose yourself over expectations. It's the first breath after years of holding it in. The world tells you to keep going no matter what, to push through, to endure, to finish what you started. But sometimes finishing what you started means staying in pain. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't to keep walking in the wrong direction, but to stop, turn around, and take a new path. Walking away isn't weakness when the road you're on is leading you further from who you are. You were taught that quitting is giving up, that it's shameful, that it means you're not strong enough or committed enough or capable enough. But no one talks about the cost of staying, the silent weight of pretending you're okay, the quiet ache of knowing this life isn't yours, the sleepless nights, the drained mornings, the forced smiles. That isn't strength, that's survival. And there's a big difference between surviving and living. Staying on the wrong path just to avoid being seen as a quitter is how people end up with successful lives and miserable hearts. You don't owe anyone your suffering. You don't have to sacrifice your peace for appearances. You don't have to prove your worth by staying loyal to something that no longer serves you. You're not required to keep playing a role that keeps you small just because you once chose it. People change, dreams change, truth evolves. What felt right years ago might feel heavy now, and you are allowed to honor that shift without apology. Freedom begins when you get honest with yourself, when you stop asking what will they think and start asking what do I need, when you stop fearing judgment and start fearing regret, when you stop waiting for permission and start listening to the part of you that's been quietly asking for more. It takes courage to leave a path you've invested in, but it takes even more courage to stay when you know it's no longer aligned with who you are becoming. Sometimes the wrong path looks beautiful. It might come with praise, recognition, even financial security. But deep down you know, when your soul is shrinking, you know when your joy is fading, you know when every step forward feels heavier instead of lighter. That's not success. That's a signal, and you have to trust that signal even if no one else understands it. Even if walking away confuses people, even if you can't fully explain why. Your peace is reason, and not quitting the wrong path isn't the end. It's the beginning. It's the start of coming home to yourself, the start of realignment, the start of creating something that reflects your truth, not just your talent. Because you can be good at something and still not be meant for it. You can be admired for something that drains you. You can reach the top of a mountain and still realize it's not your mountain. And when that moment comes, the bravest thing you can do is climb back down and find your own. You're not meant to be stuck in a story that no longer fits. You're not here to live someone else's version of success. You're not here to impress a crowd while your spirit slowly disappears. You're here to live honestly, fully, authentically. And sometimes that means quitting, not out of fear, but out of love. Love for the person you are becoming. Love for the life that's still waiting for you. Love for the peace that comes when you finally stop pretending. The wrong path teaches you how to survive, but the right path teaches you how to feel alive. It may not come with immediate applause. It may not look perfect, but it will feel real. And in that realness, you'll find energy again. You'll find clarity. You'll find your own rhythm instead of racing to meet someone else's timeline. You'll begin to breathe again, without the weight of performance pressing on your chest. It's okay to say, this isn't for me anymore. It's okay to admit that you've changed. It's okay to choose something different even if others don't understand. You are not obligated to stay where you no longer grow. You don't need permission to evolve. You don't have to keep watering dead soil hoping something will bloom. The life you want will never come from betraying the truth inside you. And quitting what isn't working is the first step toward creating what will. Letting go is not the same as giving up. Giving up comes from fear. Letting go comes from wisdom. Wisdom that tells you you're allowed to choose peace over pressure, joy over approval, purpose over performance. When you quit the wrong path, you make space for the right one. You open yourself to possibilities that were once blocked by your need to keep proving yourself in a game. You no longer believe in. You might lose some things when you walk away, but you'll gain yourself, and that gain is worth more than anything you leave behind. Because your soul is not here to be sacrificed for a goal that doesn't reflect your truth. Your heart is not here to be silenced for the sake of being accepted. You were not created to fit into boxes you've outgrown. You were created to evolve, to rise, to change. And change starts when you decide that pretending is no longer an option. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to take the first step away from what's wrong. You'll figure the rest out on the way. Freedom isn't found in a perfect plan. It's found in the willingness to choose truth even when it's messy, even when it's uncertain, even when it means being misunderstood. Because peace will always be louder than applause, and freedom will always be more valuable than staying comfortable in a life that costs you your joy. So if something inside you is whispering that you're on the wrong path, listen. If your body feels heavy, your mind feels cloudy, and your heart feels restless, listen. If every step forward feels like betrayal instead of progress, listen. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is quit the wrong game and finally begin living the right life for you. The loudest applause can still leave you feeling empty inside. You can stand on the biggest stage, hear your name being celebrated, feel the admiration from every direction, and still feel completely alone within yourself. The world may be cheering for the version of you that you show them, but deep down you know that applause doesn't always mean alignment. Praise doesn't always mean peace. Recognition doesn't always mean you're where you're meant to be. It's possible to be everything others wanted and still feel like nothing to yourself. That's the weight of playing the wrong game in life. You learn how to become who people admire. You master the art of being impressive. You check all the boxes and reach all the milestones. You build a name that people respect and an image that inspires. But when the crowds leave and the lights dim, you're left with yourself. And that's when the truth begins to surface. That despite all the clapping, your heart is still quiet. Despite all the success, your soul still feels unsettled. It's easy to believe that the applause will be enough. that once you finally get there you'll feel fulfilled. You tell yourself, if I just win this award, if I just get this promotion, if I just reach this number, if I just gain their approval, then I'll feel whole. But you reach the milestone and nothing changes inside. Maybe for a moment you feel a high, but it fades faster than you expected. And then you're back to chasing again, hoping the next applause will finally fill the emptiness the last one couldn't. The truth is, applause is external, but fulfillment is internal. They don't always align. The world sees your actions, but only you can feel your alignment. You can fool everyone else, but your soul knows when something isn't right. Your soul knows when you've abandoned your truth to meet expectations. Your soul knows when your performance has replaced your purpose. That emptiness you feel isn't failure, it's a signal. A signal that you're succeeding at something that doesn't feed you. A signal that you're being celebrated for a version of yourself that doesn't match the real you. In the wrong game, applause becomes a drug. You keep chasing it, needing more each time to feel the same level of worth. But the more you chase it, the more disconnected you become from yourself. You start shaping your identity around what gets praised. You start choosing what will be liked over what is true. You start silencing the parts of yourself that don't fit the brand you've created. And slowly you start to feel empty, not because you're not enough, but because you've abandoned what made you whole in the first place. The loudest applause can feel like pressure. Now you have to maintain the image. Now you have to meet the expectations. Now you have to keep being who they think you are, even if you've changed, even if you're tired, even if you want something different. You begin to feel trapped by your own success. You begin to feel afraid of disappointing the people who admire you. And in that fear you lose even more of yourself. It's hard to walk away when the world is clapping. It's hard to say this isn't me when everyone else is saying you're amazing. It's hard to be honest about your emptiness when your life looks full. But your soul doesn't care about how things look. It cares about how things feel. And if you're constantly performing, if you're constantly hiding your truth, if you're constantly seeking approval over authenticity, no amount of applause will ever feel like peace. You don't need more applause, you need more truth, more alignment, more moments that feel like you, more spaces where you can breathe without pressure, more time spent doing what brings you back to life, not what keeps you in the spotlight. You don't need to be louder, you need to be real. Real with yourself, real with your values, real with what you want. The applause that matters most isn't external, it's internal. It's when your mind and your heart are at peace. It's when you look in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. It's when you go to bed knowing you didn't just perform today, you lived it. You spoke your truth, you made decisions that reflect your values, you stayed grounded in who you are. That kind of applause doesn't echo through crowds, it settles deep in your chest. As peace, sometimes walking away from the applause is the most powerful thing you can do. Sometimes choosing quiet over noise is the path to real clarity. Sometimes being misunderstood is the cost of being fully yourself. And that's a price worth paying, because there is nothing more exhausting than being everything to everyone, but nothing to yourself. Nothing more painful than being praised for a life that doesn't feel like yours. You're allowed to outgrow the stage you once wanted. You're allowed to stop chasing what no longer speaks to your soul. You're allowed to redefine what success means for you. It's not about how many people cheer for you. It's about how deeply you feel connected to what you're doing and who you're becoming. It's about knowing that you're not just existing, but living in a way that feels honest and whole. Let the applause fade if it must. Let people wonder why you chose a quieter path. Let them question your decisions. But don't let yourself go unheard any longer. Don't keep chasing approval at the cost of your own peace. Don't keep performing in a life that empties you. You are not here to be clapped for, you are here to be true. And truth will always take you further than applause ever could. So if you feel empty, despite all the praise, listen to that feeling. It's not weakness, it's not ungratefulness, it's your soul calling you back home. Calling you to step off the stage and into your real life. Calling you to stop playing the wrong game and start building a life that feels like freedom, peace, and joy, not just performance, approval, and pressure. Because the loudest applause means nothing if it drowns out your own voice. You weren't born to impress the world, you were born to express your truth. Somewhere along the way you were taught that your value comes from being impressive, from being admired, from meeting the expectations of others and standing out in all the ways society says you should. but the deeper purpose of your existence was never to perform for an audience. You are here to be real, not perfect. You are here to be whole, not polished. You are here to be free, not measured by how many people clap for you. Your life is not a show, it's a story, and only you can write it truthful. If wrong game convinces you that your worth is tied to approval, that the louder the applause, the more important your life is. So you spend years curating yourself, molding your words, shaping your path, and editing your soul to fit into an image that gets accepted. You become what they want to see while slowly silencing what you need to say. You focus so much on impressing that you forget how to express. And in that forgetting, you lose touch with the parts of yourself that are most alive, most sacred, most true. We're not created to be a reflection of someone else's ideas. You were created with your own rhythm, your own voice, your own fire. That fire dims when you spend your life trying to meet standards that were never meant for you. It dims when you keep comparing yourself to people who aren't even living your kind of life. It dims when you prioritize appearance over authenticity. And eventually you find yourself surrounded by success, but disconnected from your self-expression. Is messy. It doesn't always look clean or sound impressive, but it's honest. It's alive. It's full of color and contradiction and beauty. When you stop trying to impress and start choosing to express, you give yourself permission to be real. And in that realness, you reconnect with your soul. You stop being a brand and start being a person again. You stop performing and start feeling. You stop hiding and start creating a life that actually means something to you. The world doesn't need another perfect image. It needs your truth. It needs your story, your questions, your growth, your presence. But you can't give the world your truth if you're too busy maintaining an illusion. The illusion of having it all together. The illusion of being exactly what everyone wants. The illusion of strength when you're actually exhausted. The illusion of happiness when you're quietly longing for more. That illusion is what the wrong game thrives on. But truth is what sets you free. There is nothing more powerful than someone who lives from their truth, not for attention, not for likes, not for validation, but simply because they refuse to betray themselves any longer. That kind of power is quiet but magnetic. It's rooted. It doesn't waver when others doubt. It doesn't collapse under criticism, because it's not based on performance, it's built on self-respect. When you know who you are and why you do what you do, the game changes. You stop chasing and start choosing. To express your truth doesn't mean the world will always celebrate you. In fact, you might lose some people. You might confuse others. You might walk away from opportunities that once looked shiny, but now feel false. But what you gain is worth it. You gain peace. You gain clarity. You gain your voice back. You start to live in a way that feels like coming home to yourself. And that feeling will always be more satisfying than the temporary high of external validation. You weren't born to live according to a script written by fear. You weren't born to shrink yourself into a version that pleases everyone but fulfills no one. You weren't born to keep chasing approval at the cost of your own voice. You were born to create, to speak, to move, to feel, to impact the world in a way that only your truth can. That's not selfish, that's sacred. That's not rebellion. That's alignment. And the moment you realize that, you begin to let go of the pressure to impress. Impressing people is temporary. You can impress someone today and be forgotten tomorrow. You can meet every standard and still feel empty. But expressing your truth creates something lasting. It creates connection. It builds depth. It awakens your purpose. It makes your life feel real again. Because when you live truthfully, everything you do carries energy. Your words, your work, your relationships become grounded in meaning. Instead of approval, you might feel fear at first. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. But that fear is nothing compared to the quiet ache of a life lived in hiding. Hiding your truth, hiding your creativity, hiding your voice, hiding your questions. That ache is the slow erosion of your soul. And you were not meant to slowly fade behind a curtain of performance. You were meant to rise in the full light of your own honesty. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to be flashy to be impactful. You don't have to have it all figured out to start expressing who you are. You just have to be willing to show up as you are in this moment. Imperfect, evolving, honest, open. That version of you is enough. That version of you is what the world actually needs more of. Not another mask, not another echo, not another performance, but real presence, real truth. Real expression. Start with small truths the ones you've been afraid to say, the parts of yourself you've buried beneath expectations, the dreams you've labeled unrealistic, the desires that keep resurfacing no matter how much you try to ignore them. Bring them into the light. Speak them, live them, honor them. That's how you begin to walk a different path. Not the path designed to impress, but the path that allows you to express the fullness of who you are. In doing that, you'll discover something powerful. The more you express your truth, the less you need applause. The more you live in alignment, the less you care about approval. The more you speak honestly, the more peace you find within yourself. And that peace becomes the new measure of success. Not how many people like you, but how fully you are being yourself. Not how many are clapping, but how deeply you are living. You weren't born to impress the world. You were born to express your truth, and that truth, when honored, becomes the most beautiful legacy you could ever leave. The safest path often leads the farthest from your purpose. It looks appealing because it offers predictability, comfort, and control. It promises stability and acceptance. It's the path that gets nods of approval from others, the one that fits neatly within society's definition of success. But just because something feels safe doesn't mean it's right. Just because it's accepted doesn't mean it's aligned. The safest road may keep you from risk, but it can also keep you from the life you were actually born to live. A purpose rarely lives in safety. It lives in uncertainty, in growth and courage. It asks you to step into the unknown, not because it's easy, but because it's real. The safest path teaches you how to survive. Purpose teaches you how to live. And the longer you stay on the safe path, the more you drift from your own soul. Because comfort has a way of numbing truth. It makes you forget that you once had dreams that didn't fit inside neat boxes. It makes you accept a smaller life because at least it's secure. But what's the cost of that security? How many days do you trade for routine? How much of your voice do you silence to fit in? How many times do you ignore the inner whisper telling you, this isn't it, just to keep everything looking okay on the surface? You might be safe, but are you alive? You might be comfortable, but are you fulfilled? You might be respected, but do you respect the life you've chosen for yourself? These are the questions that safety never encourages you to ask. You see others chasing their dreams, living boldly, stepping into spaces that challenge and stretch them, and you tell yourself, they're lucky or reckless or different. But the truth is, they're just willing to risk comfort for alignment. They're not fearless. They're just more committed to their truth than their image. And you can be too. But first you have to be willing to admit that the safe path might be keeping you from what you're really here for. You weren't born to live inside lines drawn by fear. You weren't created to build your life around what ifs and worst case scenarios. You have ideas that were meant to challenge the world, not conform to it. You have a voice that was meant to be heard, not hidden. You have energy that was meant to create, not just maintain. But none of that can happen if you keep choosing what feels safe over what feels true. People will tell you to be practical, to stay where it's predictable, to follow the rules and not make waves. But practicality without passion is just another form of quiet resignation. It's how dreams die in silence. It's how you end up living decades in a life that never really belonged to you. And when you finally stop to reflect, you'll realize the thing you feared most wasn't failure. It was never fully trying. Safe path often disguises itself as the smart choice, and sometimes it is. Not every risk is worth taking, but there's a difference between wisdom and avoidance. Wisdom listens to fear and moves forward with clarity. Avoidance lets fear dictate the entire journey. When you keep choosing what looks safe, you slowly abandon your purpose. Because purpose will always require movement, discomfort, and faith. It's not about being reckless. It's about being honest. If the life you're living doesn't reflect your heart, then it's not the right life, no matter how secure it seems. If your work feels empty, if your days feel robotic, if your dreams feel distant, then you're not thriving, you're simply existing. And you weren't created just to exist. You were created to contribute, to grow, to serve, to awaken something meaningful in the world. That kind of life doesn't come from safety. It comes from courage. It comes from the courage to question what you've accepted. The courage to admit when you've outgrown something. The courage to step away from what everyone else says is a good life because it no longer feels like your life. It comes from the willingness to believe that your purpose is worth more than your comfort, that your truth is worth more than your image, that your peace is worth more than playing it safe. The safest path might offer fewer disruptions, but it also offers fewer breakthroughs. You won't find your full capacity in what's familiar. You won't find your passion by staying in neutral. You won't unlock your creativity while staying inside the lines. The deeper parts of you were designed to be stretched, not shelved. And the longer you play it safe, the harder it becomes to hear your own voice underneath all the noise of expectation. Evidently, the cost of safety becomes too high. You start to feel restless. You start to feel like you're watching your life from a distance. You start to feel like time is slipping away while you wait for the perfect moment to begin living on purpose. But there is no perfect moment. There's only now. There's only the decision to stop betraying yourself in the name of being comfortably. Truth is your purpose will never be found in the safest option. It will always live somewhere just beyond what you can control. And that's okay, because you don't need certainty to take the next step. You just need honesty. You just need to admit that the life you want requires something different from the life you have. And that's not failure. That's growth. That's alignment. That's the beginning of something real. You are not too late, and you are not too far gone. You can begin again. You can choose a different path. You can honor the quiet knowing that you were made for something more than what's safe. Because deep inside you already know. You know what lights you up. You know what keeps calling to you. You know what kind of life would make you feel alive again. And you're not crazy for wanting it. You're just finally ready to stop playing the wrong game and start living your truth. So be brave enough to leave the safe path if it no longer reflects who you are. Be bold enough to disappoint others if it means staying true to yourself. Be willing to trade predictability for purpose, because at the end of your life you won't remember how safe you played it. You'll remember how real you were, how deeply you lived, and how fully you became the person you were always meant to be. You don't need a new plan, you need a new perspective. The world constantly tells you to hustle harder, plan better, and chase bigger goals. But none of that matters if you're chasing the wrong thing. You could have the most detailed strategy, the clearest timeline, the most disciplined habits, and still end up in a place that feels wrong. Because it's not about the structure of your plan, it's about the direction of your vision. If your vision is out of alignment, no plan will ever bring peace. You think the problem is the path, but sometimes the real issue is the lens through which you see yourself. You keep adjusting your schedule, setting new goals, trying different methods, thinking maybe this time it'll click. But if your core perspective is rooted in fear, comparison, insecurity, or outside validation, every plan you create will be shaped by that distortion. You'll build a life based on escaping discomfort instead of stepping into purpose. You'll choose what feels safe instead of what feels true. A shift in perspective can do more than any new plan ever could. When you begin to see yourself not as someone who needs to prove their worth, but as someone who already carries value within, then your choices begin to change. When you stop looking at life as something you have to conquer and start seeing it as something you're here to experience deeply, the pressure lifts. When you realize you're not behind, you're just waking up to what actually matters. Your whole direction shifts. Wrong game in life convinces you to always look outward for answers. You're taught to follow trends, study what others are doing, and use someone else's success as your roadmap. But your life isn't meant to be a copy. You're not here to duplicate what worked for someone else. You're here to uncover what resonates with you. And that kind of discovery doesn't come from new plans. It comes from a new way of seeing, a deeper kind of honesty, a willingness to question what you've accepted as truth. It's possible that the life you're trying to fix was never meant for you in the first place. It's possible that the emptiness you feel isn't because you're lazy, unmotivated, or lost, but because you're building towards something that doesn't feed your soul. And no plan can solve that. No to-do list can heal that. The healing begins when you stop and ask if you're even playing the right game, if the goals you're chasing even belong to you, if the future you're planning actually reflects your heart. When your perspective changes, everything changes. You stop measuring your life by how productive you are and start measuring it by how connected you feel. You stop looking for shortcuts and start looking for substance. You stop trying to impress others and start trying to live honestly. That internal shift realigns you with your purpose, and with that alignment, even simple steps become powerful. You realize that clarity isn't found in another book, another course, or another motivational video. It's found in stillness and listening to your own inner wisdom. and that voice inside you has likely been speaking for a long time. It's the quiet pull toward a different path, the repeated discomfort in spaces that used to excite you, the growing desire to slow down, to reconnect, to breathe. That's your soul asking for a new perspective. Not a new plan, but a deeper look at the life you've been living on autopilot. You might not need to change your career, your relationships, or your location. You might just need to look at them through the lens of truth instead of pressure, through curiosity instead of fear. You might need to ask why you're doing what you're doing, who you're doing it for, what you're hoping to feel when you get there, and whether that feeling is already available to you. If you stop long enough to notice that you can't build a meaningful life from a place of misalignment, you can't create peace by organizing chaos. You have to pause. You have to look again, not with the eyes of the world, but with the eyes of your soul. You have to ask not just what do I want to achieve, but who do I want to be while I'm achieving it? What kind of life do I want to feel in my bones, not just show on my resume? Wrong. Game makes you believe that more is the answer. More plans, more hustle, more hours, more sacrifice. But sometimes what you need is less noise, less pressure, less pretending. And in that space, what matters begins to rise. The truth that's been buried under expectations, the passion that's been dimmed by practicality, the freedom that's been traded for approval. These are the parts of you that can only come alive when you stop chasing and start seeing you weren't created to live from a checklist. You were created to live with purpose. And purpose isn't always found in plans. It's found in perspective, in asking harder questions, in being brave enough to stop long enough to listen, in letting go of who you thought you had to be so you can finally become who you really. Your plans are useful, but they're not enough. You need a clear lens before you need a clear map. You need to see the truth before you can walk in it. You need to face what's not working, not with blame, but with compassion. You need to admit that maybe you've been doing everything right according to the world, but wrong according to your own soul. That admission isn't defeat. It's freedom. When your perspective changes, you stop playing the wrong game. You stop chasing success at the cost of self. You stop running toward goals that look good but feel empty. You begin to build a life that nourishes you, not just one that impresses others. And from that place of truth, your plans will begin to work. Because now they're not just strategies, they're expressions of alignment. Before you create another 5-year plan, before you write down another goal, before you map out your next big move, stop and ask yourself, what game am I playing, and does it reflect who I am? That question might change everything, not because it gives you a better answer, but because it finally helps you see what you've been missing all along: your own truth, your own voice, your own purpose waiting patiently beneath all the plans you thought would save you. Real courage is walking away from the life you were told to want and building the one that feels like home. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do, because it means facing the voices that shaped you, the beliefs that raised you, and the expectations that you've carried for years without ever questioning. It means standing still while the world tells you to keep running. It means unlearning everything you thought success meant and redefining what it means to be whole. You grew up hearing what life should look like, what path to take, which steps to follow, what dreams to chase, what kind of success matters. And maybe you followed those instructions for a while. Maybe you did everything right. You checked the boxes and followed the map and did what everyone said would lead to a good life. But somewhere along the way it stopped feeling like your life. Somewhere between doing what was expected and doing what was honest, you lost your sense of home inside yourself. That's when the inner voice starts to whisper, the quiet tug that tells you something's off, that you're not where you're meant to be, that you're living a version of life that doesn't fully reflect who you are. But you ignore it at first because you don't want to disappoint anyone. You don't want to risk the approval, the safety, the comfort that comes with staying in line. So you keep going, hoping that one more achievement, one more milestone, one more round of applause will make it all feel worth it. But it doesn't, because no amount of success can satisfy a soul that's disconnected from its truth. No title, no salary, no house, no recognition can replace the feeling of living in alignment. You can decorate the life you were told to want with everything shiny and impressive and still feel completely out of place in it. Because home isn't about how it looks, it's about how it feels. It's about whether you can breathe in your own life without pretending. Walking away from the wrong life isn't weakness, it's strength. it's clarity. It's choosing presence over performance and truth over tradition. It's the willingness to start over even when you don't have a plan. It's the decision to trust yourself more than the voices around you. That's courage, not the kind people celebrate with awards and headlines. The quiet kind. The kind that requires you to sit with discomfort and still move forward. It doesn't mean your old life was a mistake. It just means you've outgrown it. That you're finally listening to the part of you that was never really satisfied with what looked good on the outside but felt hollow on the inside. That you're brave enough to admit that your needs have changed, your truth has evolved, and your heart is asking for something different. That honesty is where real transformation begins. You might lose people along the way. People who only knew the version of you that played by the rules. People who loved the image but never understood the soul. And that will hurt, but it will also set you free. Because what's the point of keeping relationships that only survive when you're suppressing who you really are? What's the point of maintaining a life that costs you your voice? Building a life that feels like home takes time. It's not as fast or flashy as the path you were taught to want. It requires patience, presence, and a willingness to slow down long enough to ask hard questions. Who am I when I'm not performing? What do I actually care about? What kind of work lights me up? What kind of people make me feel seen? What kind of life lets me exhale and not just endure? Answers might not come all at once, but even asking them shifts something. It opens a door back to yourself. It reminds you that you're not lost, you're just buried under roles and labels and expectations that never really fit. And with every step away from that false life, you get closer to your own you, begin to notice moments that feel more alive, conversations that don't require performance, work that energizes instead of drains, places that feel peaceful instead of pressured. You begin to build something from the inside out. And though it may not look impressive on paper, it will feel like freedom, because it's yours, created from truth, not fear, from desire, not duty. You'll still face challenges, but now they'll come with meaning. They'll stretch you, but they won't break you. Because when your life reflects your soul, you're stronger. You're more grounded, more resilient, more whole. You're no longer just surviving a script you were handed. You're writing your own story. People might not understand why you walked away. They might call it a waste or a failure or a mistake. But that's because they don't feel what you feel. They don't wake up in your body or carry your dreams or live with your regrets. Only you know what it costs to stay in a life that looks right but feels wrong. And only you can make the decision to change that. Real courage is not loud. It doesn't always get celebrated. Sometimes it's quiet and lonely. Sometimes it means disappointing others. Sometimes it means letting go of a future you once wanted. But in exchange, you get your soul back. You get your joy, your energy, your truth. You get to finally live without a mask. You realize that life isn't about chasing what impresses others. It's about building what fulfills you. It's about choosing what feels like peace, what feels like purpose, what feels like home. And once you taste that kind of life, there's no going back, because the feeling of being whole outweighs every fear you had about walking away. So if your soul is restless, if your days feel disconnected, if your wins feel empty, it might not be that you're broken. It might be that you're just playing the wrong game. And it's okay to walk away. It's okay to begin again. It's okay to choose the life that feels like home, even if no one else understands it. Because at the end of it all, it's not about how much you achieved. It's about how deeply you lived, how honestly you loved, and how fully you became yourself. So what if you're playing the wrong game? That doesn't make you a failure. It makes you aware. And awareness is power. Because now you can choose again. You can rewrite the rules. You can walk off the field. You can say, this isn't for me. And you can begin the wild and beautiful process of returning to your real self. The self that doesn't need to compete. The self that doesn't chase validation. The self that knows peace is the real prize. You don't have to be who the world expects. You just have to be who your soul longs to be. That's the real game. And once you start playing that, everything changes.